Welcome back, everybody, to the Advantage Survival Podcast. I'm your host, Les Baker, and this is episode number 18. And today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2014. And in this episode, we're going to talk about prepping and survival selfishness. What? So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. Man, we got a lot to talk about today. But first, I want to apologize to my loyal listeners. Listen, guys, I apologize. Back in the saddle again. I fell off my horse for the second time, and I truly apologize for that. Life does get in the way, and certainly doing a podcast and keeping it going costs money, and it's hard. I quit my job. I walked away from a six-figure income a year, 1 month, 3 days, and 15 hours and 37 minutes and 12 seconds ago. And when I quit that job, I did it so my wife could pursue her career in real estate, and also I could be a stay-at-home dad, watch my kids grow up, and help her in her business too. And it gives me some freedom to do other things. And certainly Wilderness Adventures was part of that, and now prepping is another part of it. And I want to kind of talk about my path to prepping with you today. Part of that is survival selfishness. What I realized was I was going out in the woods. I was doing search and rescue. I was very active outdoors. Not that I'm not now, but I was spending a crap load of money on gear that was very selfish for me because it was gear meant for me. It wasn't meant for my family. I was spending a lot of money on gear and equipment that helped me be better at survival and, doing what I love to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you take a look at what's going on around the world today, the crappy tyranny that our wonderful government is, barfing up on us every single day and shoving down our throats, you tend to want to do a few things to be better prepared. And it's just not the crazy government or the economy or whatever. It's also a job loss. What if you lost a job? I chose to lose my job, but it also meant we needed to tighten up our budget. We were going to be living on less than half of what we were living on before. So part of that, we had to get out of debt. We had to work really, really hard to get out of debt. And Dave Ramsey's snowball technique helped us immensely to get rid of the debt that was choking us and enslaving us as a family. The next thing is survival selfishness. Being selfish, buying that equipment, doing those things that, realistically cost money. You may not know it, but it does cost money. So I had to refocus, what I was spending my money on to things that really mattered. And what really mattered was my family and having them prepared for, whatever might come, whether it's another ice storm that knocks out power for 7 or 10 days. And we've had those here. Whether it's an earthquake that, really disrupts services for an extended amount of time. Certainly, wherever you live, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever it might be, these are things that you need to be prepared for. You need to have the advantage of survival in those types of situations. So if I sound passionate about it, it's because I am. I want you to be prepared. If there's anything at all that you can take away from this podcast today, is wake up and start being more prepared. Don't be survival selfish. It's easy to sit and look at that just awesome, cool new knife online and go, man, this thing costs a lot of money. I think it would be really cool. I would be a real badass if I had this in my survival, toolkit, but do I really need it? Now I look at, what things cost as far as gear and equipment, and I go, how much food will this buy? How much food can I put away for my family? What can I do to improve our survival situation in an urban survival situation? So, man, I really, really took a tailspin here after back in the saddle again and really evaluated, what the heck's going on as far as what really mattered and what really mattered for not only my survival, but my family's survival. I had to come to the realization that being survival selfish is not a good thing. And I can only tell you from what I experienced, I feel so much better knowing that my family is prepared for whatever disaster, a calamity that comes our way. Just having a few things put away, enough food to last us, more than 3 days. I mean, I remember when the power went out. This was January 2012, I think, was the last, real big weather event around here, and it was an ice storm, and it knocked our power out almost 10 days. And, we had a generator and we were prepared, but, day 5, 6, getting kind of low on fuel, thought it'd be a great idea to go down to a Safeway gas station that was one of the only gas stations in several square miles that had power. And, they were running out of fuel like crazy. And when I pulled up to that thing, I didn't really need the fuel, but man, it was packed and people were agitated. They were, I can't even describe the frenzy that some of the folks were in. I had a guy try to ram me. I was in one line on one side of the pump. He was on the other side of the pump, and he tried to ram my truck because he wanted in ahead of me. It's crazy. People are going to lose it when things go bad, so you need to be prepared for that too. Man, I'm rambling on here, but listen, let's talk about a couple of things. Wilderness survival is key for advantage survival, and I spent some time after I walked away from my job to write an ebook, and it's called Surviving a Day Hike All Night, and you can get it on Amazon. You can also go to advantagesurvival.com and click on the link there. It'll take you to a spot you can buy it. I think it's still 99 cents. You can also go to AS Gear Shop and take a look at the book there and purchase it. You'll help support the podcast. You'll help keep the lights on here. You'll help me continue to talk and keep things moving. But I just want to take some time and focus in on prepping and not being survival selfish. So what is my path to prepping? I'm not a prepper. I never was a prepper. Sure, I had items that I used in my systems of survival, my wilderness systems of survival, but I didn't have items that really took the home, the family into consideration. When I make sure I have a sleep system for a wilderness environment, crap, oh dear, I didn't have sleep systems for my own family if we had an earthquake or we had to get the heck out of here in a hurry. We live not very far from train tracks, and you can't even imagine the things that get carted down those train tracks every given day and night. Some of those rail cars, tanker cars have some pretty bad things in them, and if they derail, they release toxic fumes, gases, whatever, drifting my way. If I have an opportunity or any kind of fair warning to get the heck out of here, I'm leaving everything. And, how are you going to handle that situation? I have a family of 5. I got two dogs that are, I'm looking at them right now, they've got to be 80 pounds. I've got to deal with that. So being a little prepared, having a plan of attack in that type of a situation or weather event or economic collapse or you name it, I want to be better prepared. So I started organizing my thoughts. I took an app on my phone, a note-taking app, and I started kind of looking at my wilderness systems of survival and kind of packaging that into an urban situation, a prepping situation. And it's a work in progress. I spent a lot of time just kind of identifying the different categories and adding categories that made sense for prepping and urban situations. But I also, realized that I needed to take it a little further. And taking it further meant I thought I'd go ahead and start another ebook. So I did. I've started another ebook. It's a book about prepping. It's a complete draft right now. I think I've pounded out 10 or 12,000 words. But, tentatively, draft-wise, the title is going to be Prepping Guide for the Newly Awakened. Now, I'll probably change that title. If you guys got a better title for me, let me know. But today I want to run down the table of contents of that book. And this table of contents helped me get organized. It helped me get focused on, what I needed to do to start prepping, to start being more prepared in an urban situation and in a family situation. And that led me down a path of a lot of research. There's tons and tons of YouTube videos on prepping. There are good ones and there are bad ones. You have to shake it out. There are tons and tons of books about prepping, and I think I've got a fair share of them now. And I'm going through those in my path to prepping and preparedness. But I want to go through my table of contents. Again, it's a draft. It's going to change, but I want to talk about some things that are, important, I think, for prepping in my situation. So let me find it here. Well, let me back up a little bit. There's a quote I added in here, and it's kind of my why, and it's my chapter. What is it? It's my chapter 1, and chapter 1 is titled "The Why in My Preps." Why do I do it? And let me explain. I explain it in a quote in the book. Here it is. I don't want my family or myself to be at the mercy of any catastrophe, nor any person or government. I want my family to survive and thrive in an increasingly manic world. I prepare to have the advantage of survival in any life scenario. And I think that kind of sums it up in a quick quote, why I prep. Now, in the book, I go into a lot of details and some of the history and kind of a lot of detail really on, my path to preparedness. But, that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. And I want to do more podcasts, probably, discussing each one of these chapters and kind of going through it. But let's start with the why in prepping. You have to figure out why you want to start prepping. Either you're waking up to the reality of what's going on financially in the world. You're realizing the tyrannical path that our current administration is taking us down, and it scares you. It's certainly a concern for me. And, I'm pushing 50 years old, but I have kids, and I'm very concerned about what their future is going to look like. It's certainly a rabbit hole that you can go down and spend a lot of time thinking about. But I want my family, my kids, to have it better than I had it when I was a kid. And I think, through my family history, we've shown that, each generation certainly has been better than the last. But now I worry. I worry that my kids aren't going to have it as good as I had it. Certainly jobs are going to be an issue for them in the future. So anyway, I want to talk about the why in prep, and that's certainly one of the big whys also. I want it to be better for my family. Chapter 2, realize your your SHTF priorities. The shit hit the fan. What are your priorities? Like I talked about earlier, the train derailment, a rail car going off and few, noxious, chlorine, whatever, blowing across the neighborhood, choking us out and killing us. The ice storm, certainly a concern. Earthquake is big on the radar screen here in the Pacific Northwest. There are a lot of things to take into consideration. Economic collapse, pandemic, whatever it might be. You need to list out all of these priorities. What are they? What are the things that are going to, kick your butt? A job loss, for example, a death of a loved one. Anything like that could send your world into a tailspin. Certainly a major illness these days will certainly financially wipe a family out, and Obamacare certainly isn't going to help you much there. So, we need to look at some of the priorities and kind of gear our preps around those. But the most important thing about prepping, I think, is whatever you do to prep, do it to benefit your family and your life. Whether something bad happens or something doesn't, you need to be prepared. And there's certainly a lot of things preparedness affords you, and one of them, I think, is saving money. And I have proven it with just grocery shopping, having the ability to not be reliant on a 3-day turnover at the grocery store. Having the ability to shop some of the sales. And taking advantage of some club stores like Costco. Those are all kind of things that help you save money, and it's really, for as far as our family goes, it's helped us out a bunch. So anyway, realize your priorities. Make sure that you understand what the threat risks are around you. things that could happen, and make sure that you've got those covered in your preps. Everybody's going to be different. What I put down in this book is certainly going to be different than what you put down for your priorities. And, the priorities listed in the chapters that I have are going to be different for you. But at least you've got something to look at, and you can go, man, this works for me. This doesn't work for me. I can use this, but how about that? If you got better ideas, man, share them. I'll be glad to talk about them and list them out, and we can help each other figure this thing out. Help us, survive. So anyway, we've got Realize Your SHTF Priorities. Chapter 3, Building Your Lights Out Kit. This was hard for me. Believe it or not. I went, crap, lights out kit. What do I do? Well, what's the first thing I need when, the power goes out? Or, some services are disrupted, whether it's my, natural gas service or my water service or, power, whatever it is, service disruption. How am I going to deal with that? So putting together a lights out kit is kind of a little bit of everything all in one kit that I can grab and go or grab and stay. I tried to figure out what, I should put this thing in. Should I put it in a big duffel bag? Should I put it in a backpack? Crap, what does this thing really look like? I settled on a tote, I think it's a 27-gallon tote. I got them at Costco. I paid like $8 or $9 for the tote, and I decided I needed 4 of them, and this was my lights out kit, tote number 1, 2, 3, and so on. And I'll talk about it in the book. But that's, in a nutshell, what the lights out kit is. It's kind of a compilation of all of the systems of survival, if you will, for prepping and urban survival. You can kind of roll into one. It's enough to get you through the first 72 hours or so, and hopefully longer. Chapter 4, I talk about safe drinking water. How do I acquire safe drinking water? How do you make the tap water, if you have a boil order, how do you make your tap water safe? If you're going to boil it, you have the fuel or the sources to do that? Or do you have some type of filter system that's really going to take out the bad stuff in water and make it drinkable? So anyway, big deal about water. If you look at the typhoon here that just whacked the crap out of the Philippines, you'll realize that certainly drinking water is a major, major issue for those folks, and in any disaster, really. All right, Chapter 5, I talk about food and food storage and cooking that food. I am learning a lot of skills on long-term food storage. It's certainly something to research. I'll talk about some of the things that I do for long-term food storage. Chapter 6, family security and safety, basically operational security, OPSEC, if you will. I talk about some of the things that you need to do in that type of situation. So hold on just a second. I got some noise rattling here in the background. Not sure what that is. I think it's my heat just kicked on. I think that's what it is. I'm going to go ahead and crank that down a little bit. Anyway, so operational security, big deal. Chapter 7, first aid and medicine. Now, obviously learn some basic skills on, first aid. Go to your fire department, take a basic first aid class. Do what you need to do to learn those types of skills, and then have the ability to store some medicines long term. One of the things that's a concern right now is certainly the flu. There are several folks in my neighborhood that have the flu. I know they're home sick. They put it out on their social media pages that, hey, crap, I'm sick today. I can't go into work. I've got the flu. You hear stories around the country of folks dying in pretty good numbers in different hospitals across the country from the flu or some form of the flu or complications of the flu. So having some medicines, having a rehydration therapy plan, all those kinds of things I'll talk about in the book. Also, Chapter 8, cache documents and contacts. Having a document kit that you can take with you if you had to leave, but also organizing all your family documents, family photos, videos, policies, you name it, titles for vehicles, whatever it might be. There's a whole long list of stuff in that chapter to consider. Packaging that up, making it secure, encrypting it some type of way, all very important things for prepping. Chapter 9, shelter and clothing. Now, man, I can only dream about having a kick butt RV that's fully stocked, that I can live for a few weeks, my family can live for a few weeks out of this thing. If my house collapsed in an earthquake, I don't have that, so I have to have a more cost-effective plan for that. And basically it's a family tent and a tarp. So there's certainly more shelter considerations, and depending on where you are in the world, your shelters may change to adapt to your environment. But shelter and clothing are huge, and along with clothing, don't forget some good shoes. All right, a lot of stuff here. Chapter 10, lighting. What are you going to do if you need lighting? You need to be able to see. You also need to have some light discipline when it comes to long-term disaster situations. And that kind of goes back to Chapter 6 and OPSEC a little bit, and light discipline, those kinds of things. We can talk about that more in the book and in future podcasts. So lighting's Chapter 10. Chapter 11, power, heat, cooling, and energy. You got to have a plan for that. What are you going to do? You're going to run on a generator? Is that sustainable? What's your plan? Chapter 12, communication and signaling. Chapter 13, personal hygiene. Chapter 14, sanitation. Huge issues in survival or disaster situations. You need to manage sanitation. Having nasty bugs come and kick your butt in a disaster is something you're not going to want to do, especially when you're under a lot of stress and you haven't been eating right, and your body is susceptible to catching some bad bugs, and you want to be able to manage your sanitation. On the other side of sanitation, you want to have the ability to manage your trash, manage your human waste. And part of that goes back to OPSEC, not having a lot of garbage stacked up, telling your neighbors that you have a lot to eat. Not that you wouldn't want to help your neighbors, and community is certainly things you want to work on in building, your kind of prepping overall plan. And we'll get into that more, but just know that that's out there. You need to think about it. Along with sanitation, Chapter 15, sleeping systems. Chapter 16, tools and hardware. 17, emergency procedures. What are your emergency procedures? Write them out. What if X happened? What are you going to do? What if you're at work, your wife's at work, and your kids are at school? Something happens, you've got to deal with it. What are your emergency procedures? Write them down, figure it out. Work out the details of meeting up and all of that. Let's move on to Chapter 18. Chapter 18, I talk about get-home bags. That's a bag that you keep in your vehicle when you're at work. When I worked in Seattle. I lived, south of Seattle. It was an hour or 2 hour drive home every night. Things went south. My vehicle, whatever, crapped out. I needed to get home. If I had to walk it, hoof it, whatever, I needed a get-home bag. And those are some provisions that I'm going to have with me that are going to help me get home. Along with that is a bug-out bag and a chaos bag. And I'll talk about those in future podcasts and obviously in the book. Chapter 19, get your rescue plans together and signaling procedures. What are you going to do? One of the things I saw on the news when they had the floods in Colorado, days went by and people were finally getting on top of their rooftops, and they were trying to find ways to signal the aircraft that were flying above to, hey, come rescue me. So if you live in an area where you're going to be climbing on top of your roof and you're going to be looking to signal somebody, what is that plan? Is that plan having some type of roof hatch in your roof where you can get onto it easily and quickly? Are you going to have some items in your attic that are going to be easily accessible that you can use to signal for help when you're up there? If that's what the plan is, you need to have a plan for it. All right, Chapter 20, Kid School Recovery Plans and Procedures. What are you going to do when the crap hits the fan and you need to get your kids? Do your kids know what to do? Do you know what to do? Have you gone to your schools, your kids' schools, and figured out? I mean, I got a kid in grade school, I got a kid in junior high, and I got a kid in high school. And, there's 3 schools that I've got to manage, and they're all different. They all have their own procedures for getting your kids out. Know what they are. Know how to contact them. Be confident about getting your kids out of school if you need to. If there's a lockdown, something bad happens at your kid's school, what are you going to do? How are you going to manage that? Do you have a plan in place for that? These are things to think about. All right, chapter 21, long-term survival sustainability. Lot of stuff there. How are you going to sustain this? You get past the first 72 hours, which I think should be more like 2 weeks or a month. But what are you going to do after that? You're going to be running low on your supplies potentially. Maybe the services aren't back up yet. Your grocery stores aren't going to be stocked. What are you going to do? How are you going to procure food? How are you going to get protein? Are you going to grow it? Do you have the skills to grow it? All these things you need to consider when you're talking about long-term survival sustainability, which leads me to chapter 22 of the book, and that's going to be called learning skills. Learning skills. One of the this may sound crazy, but one of the skills that I wanted to conquer is baking a loaf of white bread. Learning how to really perfect a loaf of white bread that I can, smear some peanut butter on and my kids are going to eat. Now I got to tell you, and I'm embarrassed, but I went through 10 loaves of bread before I finally found a recipe and a technique that I can use to make a good, decent loaf of bread that's going to last more than a few days, and hopefully, people are going to want to eat it. So learning just how to bake bread is a simple skill, but it's one you need to consider when you can't go down to the store and get bread, right? So, the other skills to learn: hunting, fishing, repairing, small engines, your vehicle, all of these kinds of things. Having the ability to construct something, out of wood, a shed, a greenhouse, whatever. All skills to learn, and the list goes on and on. We'll talk more about that in the skills chapter. All right, chapter 23 was final thoughts, and I just kind of go over some other scenarios, and again, just final thoughts of prepping. And again, this book is in the works. I think I've pounded out. Well, let me see here. I think I am on chapter 9. I'm on shelter and clothing right now, and heading for chapter 10. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably put out a podcast and just kind of go through the chapters, and maybe I'll just post the chapter for the book on the blog at advantagesurvival.com. Have you read it, have you kind of get an idea. But my main hope here is to get people thinking about prepping. Make sure that you understand that prepping is not a bad word. People will label you as a prepper. Screw them. Don't tell them you're prepping. And that kind of goes along with OPSEC. They don't need to know. They don't need to know that you're hauling in extra water. They don't need to know that you're bringing in some extra food for your family. Don't let the labels fool you. You're doing things that your grandparents and their parents and grandparents did before you. They're having a little bit of common sense and being prepared. Again, we live in such a fragile society. Every time I go back to that Safeway to get my fuel or the Costco to get my fuel, it doesn't matter when I go, I see a tanker truck there dumping more fuel in the underground tanks. They run out all the time, and if something happened, earthquake or a weather event or whatever, and those trucks can't get there, along with the same trucks that are heading to my grocery stores to put the Twinkies on the shelf, I'm screwed if I don't have something in my house to last me more than a few days. So with that, go to AdvantageSurvival.com, go to Advantage Survival on Facebook, like my Facebook page, Less View on Twitter, check that out. I'm on Google Plus, I think now, Less View there maybe. Anyway, subscribe. Hopefully you like the podcast. I promise I'll try to get more of these out, and I'll work through the prepping portion of stuff. And that's pretty much it today. Thanks again for listening.